Welcome to tonight's virtual Civil War presentation brought to you by CivilWarTalk.com. We're so glad you joined us. Our guest tonight is Dr. Kurt Luther, creator of Civil War Photo Sleuth, a platform that utilizes modern technology to help identify Civil War soldiers, sailors, and civilians.
You're muted, Laura.
This series is provided by CivilWarTalk.com, the American Civil War discussion forum. We're pleased to be able to bring these fantastic presentations to you via the live virtual platform. If you aren't already a member of CivilWarTalk.com, we hope that you'll be joining us. We'll be providing some information later in the program about how to become a member.
Our guest, Dr. Kurt Luther, is an associate professor of computer science and, by courtesy, history at Virginia Tech. He directs the Crowd Intelligence Lab, researching the complementary strengths of crowdsourced human intelligence and artificial intelligence, AI, in domains like history, journalism, national security, and creativity. Since 2015, Dr. Luther has written a quarterly column on Civil War photo sleuthing for Military Images magazine. He was named an emerging scholar by the American Civil War Museum and a distinguished writing awards finalist by the Army Historical Foundation. His Civil War photo sleuth project, supported by the National Science Foundation, Military Images magazine, Virginia Tech, and the Virginia Center for Civil War Studies, was officially launched as a web-based platform at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. on August 1st, 2018. Tonight, Dr. Luther will tell us more about Civil War Photo Sleuth, the platform he developed that uses crowdsourcing and facial recognition software to help identify subjects in Civil War era photographs. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kurt Luther.
All right. Thank you all so much for the wonderful introduction and warm welcome. I feel like I'm certainly among friends here with such a knowledgeable and enthusiastic group. And my goal is to try to teach you something that you don't already know. So I think I need to share my screen. And can you see that now? Okay, great. So as you've been promised, today I'll be talking about Civil War Photo Sleuth, website that we've created a few years ago and have been cultivating a community like Civil War Talk ever since. And I imagine there's probably a good amount of overlap between the two, but my goal is by the end of this talk, there'll be even more overlap. So yes, I have an agenda here to get you using my website as well, but hopefully it'll be mutually beneficial. So what's on the agenda specifically? We're going to talk about this idea of Civil War photo sleuthing in really three different time periods. We'll start with photo sleuthing as a historical phenomenon, and what did photo sleuthing look like during the Civil War era and immediately following it. Then I'll talk about some studies we've done of what Civil War photo sleuthing looks like today, what collectors and genealogists and historians do today when they're trying to identify unknown Civil War photos. And then finally, a glimpse at the future, some of the projects that we've been working on in my lab and are hoping to work on in the future to support photo sleuthing in the future and beyond. So let's start with the history. And I'm sure that many of you know how important photography was during the Civil War era. It was, of course, the first conflict to be widely documented by photography. And what's kind of amazing to me is that although the technology was a few decades old, people had really already begun to embrace it and value it the same way that I think we still do today. Photographs were really important to people who lived during the Civil War era, and they were literally the social media of the day. Initially, there was not a whole lot of need, of course, to do photo sleuthing because people already knew who the people were in the photos that were depicted. but that would change. Another example of a really powerful photo that I think kind of sets the tone for how important this was to folks back then, just as it is today. Look at this amazing photograph that you may have seen from the Library of Congress of Freeman Mason and holding a photograph of him and his brother, Michael Mason, who was killed. Just an amazing image. And I'm sure you've seen others equally powerful. So how did photo sleuthing start to emerge? It began even as the war was still in progress. There's a famous story you may already know about a soldier killed at the Battle of Gettysburg, and he was unidentified. Of course, it wasn't as there were no official dog tags, and identification badges were not yet pervasive. So this soldier was unidentified on the battlefield, and all that was available to identify him was a photograph that he held of 3 children. And it's an amazing photograph. We still can find copies of it today. These 3 children were used to try to identify their father, this unknown soldier. There's a national campaign. It was distributed all around the country, and incredibly, it was successful. They were actually able to figure out through this photograph the name of the soldier, Sergeant Amos Humiston, Company C, 154th, New York, who you also see pictured here. Another example, one that I've written about in Military Images magazine, the Dead Letter Office. During the Civil War era, tons and tons of letters getting sent from home to the battlefront and vice versa. And not every letter is going to reach its destination. Maybe the address is incorrect, the soldiers moved on. So the letters that don't make it to their destination end up in a special office of the US Post Office called the Dead Letter Office. And here, it's an amazing historical, I guess, factoid, but the office was responsible for trying to find the destinations of these letters that didn't quite make it. So they would look at the envelopes and try to read the handwriting or try to infer what the address was supposed to be. And if that didn't work, that was called blind reading, then they actually were authorized to open up the envelopes and read the mail to, again, try to get a sense of where this letter is supposed to be going. And they would actually employ clerks who were either women or retired clergy who they thought were more trustworthy than your average person, so they could be trusted with this task of opening letters. And not surprisingly, they would find lots and lots of photos. So the idea struck them, well, if we put these photos up in the office, maybe people will recognize the soldier, and then that will help figure out where the letter is supposed to go. So they started to do this. And they actually accumulated somewhere between 5,000 and 15,000 of these photographs. They'd be mounted on large 4x9 placards, and they would be displayed on the walls of this Dead Letter Office in Washington, D.C. They're kind of recognizable today because they have these brass clips that were used to affix them to the placards, and then the red lettering, which would correspond to the envelope with the rest of the letter in it. So this is moderately successful. The war ends. What happens to these photos? Well, they haven't all been identified. So eventually they end up in a special album that's been custom built for these big placards. And there's even a wooden cradle that comes along with the album that allows somebody to open it and just kind of page through it. And this cradle and album of Dead Letter Office photos travels throughout the US for decades. Anywhere there's a big group of people that has potential to find an ID, there's this cradle is likely to be there. There's one really fun story. There's actually a number of these stories, but one I really like from 1898. An Omaha woman browsing the album in a government building at the Trans-Mississippi Exhibition discovers a wartime photo of her father, J.J. Gorman. A Civil War veteran of Company D, 86th Indiana, Gorman mailed the photo from Camp Carrington, Indianapolis to his family in South Bend in 1862. 35 years later, his family finally receives the photograph by seeing this album. And Gorman, the soldier, was so pleased that he sent a thank you letter to the exhibit director. And he wrote, quote, "I am greatly obliged for the return of the picture," unquote. So apparently this worked as well. And there's another book from a few years earlier, 1893, talking about this album. And the quote is, in various ways, many of these pictures have reached the families for which they were originally intended. The blanks indicate where the pictures have been taken out and restored to their owners. So this is this photo that you're seeing here is actually from this book from 1893. So photo sleuthing was clearly underway even during the war and then in the decades immediately after. Now let's cut ahead to 150 years later to the present. And what does Civil War photo sleuthing look like today? This process of trying to figure out the unknown names and stories of soldiers and sailors and civilians in Civil War era photos. So how many survive? It's hard to say, but one estimate from Ron Coddington is that there's at least 4 million Civil War photos just of Union soldiers surviving today. So we're talking big numbers. All right, so of those 4 million, at least Union photos and an unknown number of Confederates, how many are identified? Well, David Wynne Vaughn and Bob Zeller estimate maybe somewhere between 10 and 20%. So millions of photos, but very few that we can identify. But of course we want to, and lots of different kinds of people want to. Historians, genealogists, archivists, collectors, dealers, all have different motivations that I'm going to talk about momentarily. And how are they doing it? They're combining both traditional methods of research and new digital tools. And I probably don't have to tell anyone in this group of the power of online communities and social media to bring people together, and not just to talk about Civil War in general, but Civil War photos in particular, trying to solve these mysteries. All kinds of different places you can do that now. So we conducted a study. We did a bunch of interviews with people in these communities to try to understand their motivations. Why are they trying to identify these photos, but also their process? Because if we can know what they do now, we can figure out what's hard about it and maybe what we can help with as software developers. So here's some of the motivations we found. Maybe you relate to some of these, at least one, maybe more than one. Some people want to solve the mystery. It's a big jigsaw puzzle, and they just enjoy the process of being that detective that figures out the mystery. Some want to help descendants of people pictured in the photographs so that they will be able to see these images of their relatives. Some like to just discover and learn about the stories of the people behind the photographs. You know, every single soldier has an interesting experience, and when you have that name, you can bring it out. And of course, there's making money. There's a big difference between an identified photo and an unidentified one in terms of value. So how about the process? What do people actually do if they have an unknown photo they're trying to identify? Well, they go through a number of steps. I don't have time to talk about them all today, but there's a couple I want to focus on. Those are the ones bold-faced here. Looking for clues, performing the search, and weighing the evidence. So if we take an unknown photograph like this, we're going to start by looking at the visual clues. On the front of the image, we have lots of different clues to look at, beyond, of course, the face. We have the uniform with the soldier's insignia. We have the accoutrements and weapons and equipment that can all provide insight into the soldier's service. The props and the backdrop of the photographer can help link it to a particular photographer or a unit. Even the border style of the mount for cartes de visite, for example, here can provide dating information. Then you have the back of the photo, and that has potentially lots of other clues. Could be completely blank, of course, but sometimes you see photographer's back marks, the name of the photographer, the location of the studio. If it's a small town, that's always really nice. If it's Washington, D.C., not so much. You might have a tax stamp to help date it between 1864 and 66. And you may have, if you're really lucky, some kind of an inscription, maybe the name, or maybe just some clues to help you narrow things down. So once these photo sleuths identify these clues, they go on to perform the search. And one of the interesting things that people told us in these interviews is depending on what those clues are, they might or might not even try. They might not even continue in this process. And they're, for example, looking at the ranks of the soldier. If it's a low-ranking soldier, one participant said, trying to identify privates in enlisted guys is basically impossible. Somebody else says, if they're not a major officer, I don't even try. So there's a sense that it's just not even worth the effort. And it's a little sad, I think, because we want to know the names of all these folks. And not just the famous ones or the high-ranking ones, but maybe even more so, the less well-known ones whose stories aren't as well-known. But let's say there's somebody they do want to identify. And I'm going to pick this example here of a soldier who presumably would be pretty easy to identify. If you know your Civil War uniforms, you can probably pick up pretty quickly that he's wearing a brigadier general's frock coat, Union Brigadier General, and the hat and hat cord as well, matching that. So how many soldiers are we really talking about here? We've already got a brigadier general. Well, a sleuth might pull up a reference book like Generals in Blue, which maybe surprisingly has over 500 generals pictured in this book. It's a great resource. But if you page through this book and you go through all 500, you're not actually going to find him. And that's because even though he's wearing the brigadier general's uniform, he's actually not a brigadier general. He's a brevet brigadier general. And as such, he was authorized to wear this uniform. So you need a different book for that. That's going to be another 1,400 generals and brevet brigadier generals in blue. And if you go through this book, when you finally get to the R section, you'll come across a guy who looks kind of similar, and that's George Rutherford. Interesting guy. He was present at Lincoln's deathbed, worked in the quartermaster department in Washington, D.C. So you have a candidate here. You've got a sort of matching face. He's got a distinctive face, and you got a matching uniform. What now? Are you done? Hopefully not. Now we want to weigh the evidence. And, depending on how unique this person is and how many other clues you have, this could be easier or harder. One thing that our participants told us in the interviews is it should not be hard to convince people. If you have to sit there and explain your image, this person says, then it's probably not who you say it is. And it's really interesting just how hard this can be. Look at this soldier down here who really just could not decide on one facial hairstyle during just the 4 years of the Civil War. He went, I think, through every possible configuration. And you're sitting there trying to figure out if we've got a match or not. And of course, we all have strong motivations to try to identify the soldier. We want to know who it is. We want to find a match, especially if it's somebody interesting or famous, or, that's all going to be beneficial. So we got to fight this confirmation bias, the desire to make a match where there really isn't one. So given how challenging this is, that takes us into the future and the work that we've been doing to try to streamline this process and help people make these identifications. So this last part is going to talk about our website and some of the projects we've been working on in this area. So as you heard maybe in the introduction, we launched a website a couple of years ago called Civil War Photo Sleuth. It's free. You can check it out at www.civilwarphotosleuth.com. And it allows you to do a few different things. You can search photographs by name, by military unit, state, a couple of other things. So it's just a database of photos you can look up. You can add photos. If you have photos in your collection that you'd like to contribute to improve the reference database, to provide a resource for other people looking for photos, you can add photos, maybe from your collection or even from public collections that we haven't gotten access to yet. And then finally, and sort of the bread and butter, of course, of this site is identifying unknown photographs. And to do that, we're combining what we call crowdsourcing and face recognition. So let's talk about face recognition a little bit. It is an artificial intelligence-based technology. And you might be surprised that it does work on historical photographs. It wasn't really designed for that initially, but it does work. It does have some unique challenges, though. These are images that are a little harder to work with than what face recognition is used to. First of all, they're black and white. They may not be as detailed as modern photographs. Modern photographs are very high resolution, especially paper images from the 1860s are not going to have as much detail. They could be damaged or discolored due to age. There could be holes and missing data, those kinds of things. But nevertheless, it's a powerful tool that we can bring into our sleuthing process. So here's a short video that shows you what it looks like to use this website. There's a dashboard that shows the photos that you and other people have added recently. If you have an unknown photo that you're trying to identify, you start by adding the photo. It needs to be scanned or digitized, or maybe you take a photo of it. You pick that photo and then you describe where it came from and you upload it. On the next screen, you're going to describe this photo as best you can using what we call tags. So you're going to describe the format, if there's any inscription, if there's photographer information, if there's a uniform, what are the uniform insignia or clues? You know, regimental numerals on the hat, collar insignia if it's a Confederate officer, all kinds of different clues here. Now, what's happening is when you select those clues, those become search filters. So if you, in this example, select an eagle shoulder strap as a visual clue, the software knows to convert that into a Union kernel. And then it says, all right, those have become search filters. We only want to see results of soldiers who are actually Union kernels at some point. And that's what this page is here. You can adjust that if you want, but by default, it's going to select based on the visual clues. Now this is the part where the face recognition kicks in, and it's going to show you soldiers who are facially similar to the one you're trying to identify. And again, these are only soldiers who match the visual clues, who held the rank of Union colonel at some point during the war, including promotions and demotions, because we do have the full military service records. If something looks close, you can do this comparison view and kind of zoom in and out and inspect the details. You can see some of their service records to kind of compare, does it make sense? Does it fit the back mark where the photographer was based? And if you actually think it's a match, you can go ahead and click the identify button, and that will link these photos together underneath the soldier's name. So henceforth, anyone looking up this name will see both of those photographs available. So that's the face recognition part, but what about the community part, the crowdsourcing part? So we need users for this site to work. Without users, it just wouldn't be possible. They're the ones adding the photographs, providing the identifications, and basically allowing us to succeed. So we did a lot of different things to try to build this user community. We went to social media and these existing online groups where people are already trying to identify photographs. No need to create them from scratch. If they're already there, we can meet them where they are. We also did lots of in-person stuff, at least before COVID. We were going to all kinds of events. We would go to Civil War collectibles shows, antique shows, different kinds of events. We'd bring our computers and laptops and show people the website and invite them to create accounts and add their own photographs. If it was a Civil War show like this, we might have collectors and dealers with Civil War photos all around us, and they could literally just bring them up and put them into the website and see what comes up. So we did lots of that. And then, of course, taking advantage of the press and media coverage that we could get, doing talks like this. Anyone that's willing to talk to us, we were happy to talk to them to get the word out that this website exists, and that the more people use it, the more beneficial it is to everybody. So how well does it work? We did an analysis the first month that the site was released and try to get a sense of how accurate are these identifications that people are trying to make using the site. In that first month, there were 88 different soldiers who had at least one photo identified. So we looked at them in 4 groups. Did they have an inscription of some kind or no inscription? And the inscription could be something really basic like Brother John, or it could be, a soldier's full name and rank. And then on the other hand, you have, is it the same view of the soldier or is it a different view? Is it 2 copies of the same carte de visite, same exact view? Or is it 2 different unique photos, 2 different tin types, 2 different ambrotypes that we need to try to determine if it's the same person? That's obviously harder. So the easiest category is same view of the soldier with some kind of an inscription. And in those cases, there were 17 of those, and they were all deemed correct by our experts. The middle difficulty categories are these two, either a different view with an inscription or the same view with no inscription. And in these cases, there were 20 and 13 of these examples, and those were all correct as well, according to our expert. And then finally, there's the hardest category, and that's a different view of potentially the same soldier and no inscription at all. So just two different photos of a person. Are they the same guy? And of those, 25 were deemed to be correct and 12 were not correct. So we're starting to see misidentifications, some false positives. Most of them are still correct, but this is clearly harder and people are struggling a little bit more with that. Just some of the quotes from people using the site that are fun to read, talking about, all right, I had 10 or 15% of images that were able to come up with a match. They were uploading half a dozen images and suddenly got a hit. It's really exciting to see what's going to come up. Now, where are we today? We have over 15,000 registered users who've actually created an account on the site. They have added over 15,000 photographs. We seeded the site with about 20,000 photographs from public collections, Library of Congress, National Archives, those kinds of things. And then they've complemented that with 15,000 more, which could come from anywhere. It could be from people's attics and basements. It could be from other public collections that we didn't have yet. Just potentially stuff you'd never get to see any other way. So we're up to about 35,000 now, and about 3/4 of those are identified. So it's a pretty valuable reference database. More results. How does the human compare with the artificial intelligence? Are these actually complementary? So one thing we found pretty quickly is people overestimate how good the face recognition is, even because it's a computer, it's artificial intelligence, it must be really, really good. But it turns out it's far from perfect. So we looked at 119 photographs that were newly identified. And of those, 19 of them, their correct match was ranked by the AI to be somewhere between number 2 and number 50. So the AI might say this is the number 45th most similar photo, and it turns out that's the correct match. It's not the case that the number 1 match is always the correct match. In fact, there were 11 cases where the correct match was somewhere beyond the number 50. So the AI thought there were at least 50 other photographs that were more similar to the mystery photo than the one that was actually right. So it's powerful, but it's really more about narrowing things down. It's not about looking at 2 different ones and giving you certainty about if it's right or wrong. And those are those complementary strengths. We found, for example, humans were really good at these profile style photo comparisons. That was a style at the time when people would look at, would photograph their profile or side view, but AI really struggles with those. Humans are better at that. Humans are also better at looking at other clues besides the facial structure itself. Humans look at things like ear shape and the nose and different hairstyles and facial hairstyles and skin discolorations and scars. Those are all kinds of things that the face recognition doesn't look at. Face recognition is just looking at the structure of your face. On the other hand, the AI never gets tired, it never gets distracted, it's very systematic, and of course humans are not like that. So they're complementary. Here's an example. Look at the images on your right here, the mystery photo on the left. Which one do you think is correct? This is the ranking that the AI produced, but it turns out the correct image is actually the last one. All these others that were proposed were not correct. One participant says, yeah, I think my eye could still do a better match, but you lose energy about it. You get tired. So some other success stories. We've helped different kinds of public collections identify unknown photos in their holdings. You can see a sampling of those here. These are more high-ranking guys, which are typically a little easier. One of my favorites is from the Library of Congress. This is one that we did right before we launched the site. There's a beautiful tintype in this Library of Congress Lillenquist collection of this assistant surgeon. He's got the sash, he's got the medical staff sword, really cool look and unidentified. We were lucky to find a match using the website to an identified CDV in the Maine State Archives. This is inscribed. It's got a period valediction. Yours truly, Francis Marion Eveleth. He's a surgeon in a couple of Maine infantry regiments. And what was really cool is that once we identified this Library of Congress image, they gave us credit in the item description. So we're a little bit of a part of history now. But not just helping out public collections, we've also been helping lots of folks with their private collections. Here's another story that I like. A collector and friend of the site, one of our more active users, Dave Morin, he's interested in New Hampshire images. So he picked up this image because it had a New Hampshire backmark, but it was otherwise unidentified. And it's a Union second lieutenant. He added it to the website, and Photo Sleuth suggested a potential match with William H. Baldwin, but he's with the 1st New York Engineers. So this doesn't quite add up. Why is this New Hampshire soldier matching a New York soldier? So he saw the facial similarities, but he didn't quite understand what is going on here. So he did a little research and into William H. Baldwin and found that he was a native of New Hampshire, the Granite State. And that was promising, but obviously not airtight. What really made it airtight was a few weeks after this, at a Civil War show, came across another copy of the same CDV, but this one, unlike Dave's, had an inscription on the back. And the inscription was, William H. Baldwin, 2nd Lieutenant, New York Engineers. So we were able to close the loop and confirm the theory that the Civil War Photo Sleuth website proposed. And what I think is neat about this is the way Photo Sleuth surfaces options that you wouldn't have considered otherwise. And that's what Dave said. He says, I never would have found Baldwin without this website, never, because he never would have thought to look at New York Engineer images. Something else we started to notice as we released this website was that people would get a potential match. And as I said, the AI can't really tell you if it's right or not. It just narrows things down, gives you a short list. So when people found something that they thought was a match, they would go back to the community and ask for second opinions, back to Facebook, back to online communities like CivilWarTalk, and say, what do you think? So they post a screenshot like this. What do you guys think? And then you'd get replies. Looks good to me. Well, the uniform doesn't quite make sense. Was he a musician? I don't think he was. And so on and so forth. Lots of these different examples. So there's clearly a need that our website wasn't fulfilling, where you'd get these potential matches, but then on the website you can't really do anything with that. You can't ask for this commentary or discussion or opinion from the community. And again, we know that AI isn't enough. I don't want to beat the dead horse here, but we did some more benchmarking just to kind of solidify this point. These are 5 different photographs on the left that we were trying to identify. Try to pick a range here. We have high-ranking and low-ranking Union soldiers, high and low-ranking Confederates, an African-American soldier. And the results were, again, pretty mixed. In 2 of the 5 cases, the number 1 ranked AI match was not the correct match. So in this case, you can see the correct one was actually ranked 5th. In this case, the correct one was ranked 3rd. And if you look at the actual confidence numbers, they're really, really close. So the only difference between the incorrect match ranked number 1 and the correct match ranked number 3 was 0.614 versus 0.601. So the AI doesn't know. It says here's a bunch that are kind of similar. So we thought we would try to support this process better with our website. The way it works now is when you add a photograph, you can ask for second opinions, and people can systematically provide that feedback that you're asking for. So you'll end up with something like this. You have your mystery photo, and then you have your short list of top candidates. And these are pulled out from face recognition, but then the community weighs in on each of these 5 and does it in a systematic way. So we have 6 different people rating each of these candidates on several different dimensions. And here you're seeing the overall rating. So the one on the left has 6 green people icons. That's the highest quality or highest confidence results. And then on the other hand, this guy on the far right has one of the worst ones here, 5 red icons and 1 yellow one. That means most of those people are voting against this guy. If you get even more fine-grained, you can see, all right, for any given pair, what exactly is similar and what exactly is not. So we have different categories: eyebrows, facial hair, nose, ears, head hair, eyes. You pick the one you're interested in, like facial hair. You can see there's kind of mixed feelings about the similarity. 3 voting for similar, 3 voting for different. And then you can see the fine-grained details here. 3 people thought the guy on the right has a full face beard. 2 people thought the guy on the left had more mutton chops or mustache without a beard. So you can see exactly where those differences are. Trying to get people to look at the specific evidence and not just the holistic decision. What is the basis for their decisions? So we did interviews with folks about this technique as well to try to get their feedback. Was this going to be useful for them? And we found that, number one, it built confidence to have these systematic comparisons. One person said that it gave them more confidence. It forced me to rule out some of the soldiers in a more systematic way instead of just saying, I don't think it looks like them. It also helped people notice things that they missed otherwise. It forces you to re-examine some of those assumptions and notice things that maybe you didn't see initially. And then finally, it was a little more organized to get this feedback in this structured way compared to other sources like comments on a Facebook post or replies to a discussion forum thread. And the thought that one participant shared is it's just a far less organized way to dissect the reactions and opinions of others on Facebook or on a forum. So wrapping up with some final thoughts, as I tried to show here, photo sleuthing is as old as the Civil War, and the photos are all kinds of resources. They're emotional resources, they're informational resources, sometimes misinformational. The motives and the techniques for photo sleuthing have changed over time. The community and the computation that we offer with our website have sort of complementary strengths. It's not just about remembering loved ones. Now there's collecting and solving the mystery and other kinds of reasons people want to do this sort of thing. And I think that in general, the future of photo sleuthing is very bright, but of course we still have challenges that we need to overcome. And I'll leave you with a final example of how we can continue the important work of the original photo sleuths. So I think the combination of technology and community, it not just lets us solve these mysteries from the past, it could even help us solve mysteries of the past. So one example, recall this placard of the dead letter office photos that I had showed earlier. So, these photos hung in the post office, the identities were unknown, awaiting a recipient who never came. But today, we've been able to apply modern photo sleuthing techniques to begin to rediscover their lost identities. This soldier, for example, unknown for 150 years, turns out to be somebody we can identify. And in particular, we now know that he is Lieutenant Charles W. Wakely, Company K, 5th Connecticut Infantry. This photo did not make it home during the Civil War era, but at least today, we can finally give his face a name and a story and begin to learn about his life and the life of all these other soldiers and people who played important roles in Civil War history. So with your help, I think we can build on the efforts of the original photo sleuths and continue their important work. Thank you for your time, and I will be happy to answer your questions and hear your great comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luther. That was fantastic. You know, I'm a huge fan of the site and the work that you guys are doing. It looks like we already have a whole lot of questions in the chat. If you haven't entered your questions in the chat, go ahead and do that. We'll have just a few, you'll have just a few minutes while we introduce and invite you to become a member of another great Civil War platform, which is CivilWarTalk.com. Tina?
We invite you tonight to join Civil War Talk. You're going to make friends for a lifetime here. And I just was looking on Civil War Talk, and two main threads that are going that are very interesting are Louisiana Zouaves and Victorian mourning brooches. So we do urge you to join. It's free, and we welcome new members, and we hope to see you there. That's it.
Thanks so much, Tina. I hope everyone will become a member of Civil War Talk. Just a reminder that membership is always free at Civil War Talk, just like at CivilWarPhotosleuths.com. Membership is free, and you can become a member with no, you don't have to share credit card information or anything like that. So go ahead and join Civil War Talk if you're not a member already. And we are going to get to those questions if you're ready, Dr. Luther.
Absolutely. Let's get to it.
All righty. Let's see if I can. There you go. Now we can see you and I can see the questions. I'll just read these for you so you don't have to squint.
Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. So the first question is, what do you think the percentage is of photos that are not identified compared to the ones that are?
Yeah, so I think that's a hard question to answer, but the best estimates that we have are from David Wynn Vaughn, a famed collector of Confederate and Georgia images, and Bob Zeller of the Center for Civil War Photography. They estimate somewhere around 10 to 20% of images today have some kind of identification. So clearly the vast majority do not. I think that's probably the experience of most folks who collect these images or come across them. So we've got our work cut out for us. Even the 35,000 images in our database, which is one of the largest digitized collections of images, even if 75% of them are ID'd, there's 3 million soldiers involved in the Civil War. That's just a drop in the bucket, a very small one.
Great. I mean, not great that there's so many that aren't identified, but it's great that we're
lots
making
of fun
progress,
challenges
right?
to work on.
Yeah, lots to work on, and we're making progress. This is actually my question. I'm curious about the facial recognition software. Sometimes the members at Civil War Talk will work on the dead on the field, trying to identify the images of dead soldiers on the field. And I'm just wondering, how does that impact the facial recognition software's ability to recognize a photo?
It does. There's two things that are going on there when we're talking about images of deceased soldiers. One is the face, of course, changes as it goes through the stages of decomposition. So the face recognition relies on looking at ratios of different features to each other. It'll compare, for example, the space between your eyes, or the ratio of the corners of your mouth versus the corners of your nose. Those are unique for each person, but as the face undergoes decomposition, those start to change. The skin starts to change, the cartilage starts to move, and then those reference points are no longer reliable, and they're not going to match the facial structure of somebody who's alive. The other issue is just losing access to some of those landmarks to begin with. They may be destroyed, or they may be obscured as the face undergoes these changes. So it's really very difficult to do any kind of reliable face comparison, either manually or with AI technology, once the face starts to undergo those changes.
Thank you. How much, Mr. McCardle would like to know, is it harder to identify Confederate images versus Union images?
Yes and no. Mostly yes. And one of the reasons is that we have far fewer identified reference images of Confederate soldiers. And that's true both in general and in our website in particular. If you look at some of the most prominent digitized collections, at least in the public, most of them are Union soldiers. For example, the Mollis Mass collection at the Carlisle Barracks Museum, they have an amazing collection of images, but they're mostly Union soldiers, they're mostly officers, and they're mostly from New England states. But there's tens of thousands of images in that collection. There's not as nearly as much to work with when we talk about Confederate images, and what is available tends to be more scattered, not as readily accessed in digitized public collections that we can easily put into our database. So that makes it harder. Some things, though, can make it easier. There's a greater variety of uniforms with Confederate soldiers, so potentially those can be distinctive in ways that are helpful. Narrowing down a particular regiment or unit it can be more definitive than your standard federal soldier with his standard issue frock coat or fatigue blouse.
Hey, Doc.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Dr. Luther,
Yes.
this is Rich McCardle. I was one of your original beta testers, and the one thing that the Confederate side is the props or where they were sitting. It wasn't like the Union side where they're in a studio, standing tall, looking good, wanting to go to Hollywood with all their guns and all of that. Most of them were further waist up. And one of the ones we were able to do in the early testing was one that the Civil War Talk folks helped me with, was a Virginia lieutenant. We were able to ID that he was wearing Virginia buttons. And he only had the initials. He said, "Here to my loving wife, you'll always be in my heart, NBF." And I think Laura was able to track down his records and ID his signature with the NBF in the case.
Wow.
So the early Confederate side, most were amber types, and they didn't get into the 10 types till later in the war, and there weren't that many studios.
That's right. That's a really cool example, and I love the way you piece together the different clues, taking advantage of the state buttons, state buckles, and I agree with you that the Confederate states just weren't able to produce as many photographs once the war was underway. You had the blockade preventing photographic supplies from getting south, and so after the initial flurry of photography as soldiers are going off to war in 1861, it really starts to peter out.
Well, I'll cover my second question and I'll leave it alone. That's the reason Confederate images are worth a whole lot more than Union images.
I think that is part of it, the rarity for sure. But also I think there's other reasons. They're very collectible. A lot of folks just interested in Confederate military experience. They may have ancestors on the Confederate side that they're really interested to collect. But there's lots of different reasons, I think, and that also applies to other types of images. Photos of African American soldiers, for example, are incredibly valuable, incredibly collectible, and also quite rare.
Well, that in images that are armed soldiers, the more weapons they got, the more they're worth on both sides of the house.
That's right.
Thanks, Richard. One of the other things, Dr. Luther, that happens a lot of times on our site, we have a lot of collectors of relics, and they'll be able to like angle a button the way that it was in an image. so that you can see that actual button and tell if it matches from the side or however the image is. You can rotate the images and tell exactly what button it is. They are so helpful with stuff like that. Really great to have that kind of community.
I love that. Incredible creativity. It reminds me, there was a pretty cool example of a 14th Brooklyn photo that was identified in a NPR article, and one of the sleuths involved in that process realized the soldier was holding his musket, and it was the height of the muzzle was below his chin, and that was used to try to estimate his height. And so somebody had an identical copy of the same weapon, took a photo of themselves, and said, "Here's what my height is." So you can tell that based on this similar photograph, he must be the same height as me, or he must be taller than me. It's really creative.
It really is. It's amazing some of the stuff that happens to identify these images. Victoria would like to know, are there subjects from other war era images? She has a photo that she thinks is from the Spanish-American War.
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, the site is focused pretty much on the Civil War era, and that is interpreted broadly. So we're interested in photos of anybody who lived during the Civil War years, soldiers or civilians. It's we don't limit it to just soldiers in uniform, because oftentimes there's soldiers wearing their civilian clothing, or there's wives, brothers, sisters. Those can all be really valuable in narrowing down the identity. And we also accept images of Civil War soldiers before or after the war. So it could be GAR photos of veterans, or photos of younger soldiers before they before the war began. So it could be prior service. I have seen lots of interest in trying to extend this technology to other historical periods. Mexican-American War, Spanish-American War. In the former case, more looking at painted portraits rather than photos. But World War II, Korean War, all kinds of things. We haven't been able to do that because of the resources involved, both human and technical. So for now, Civil War Photo Sleuth stays focused on this era, but we're trying to figure out ways that we could apply the technology to other time periods, because we know it's valuable for historians and genealogists and collectors of many eras.
Absolutely. Catherine has 80 images of soldiers from the 105th Ohio, and she's wondering, since I know, isn't that amazing? And they're not on your website yet.
Even better.
I know, and some of them are later in life. She wants to know if these would be helpful to upload or not.
Oh, yes. Please add those photographs. We, again, are very interested in photos of soldiers from any time in their lives, post-war or pre-war. And the face does change as we age, but it can still provide very helpful clues to narrow down possibilities. Even if the face has changed, it's still likely to bring up similar photos, including a potential match from years earlier.
Right. Well, I hope she'll go ahead and upload those. And Gary would like to know if, I think you've already answered the question, but can you use photos from later decades like GAR to compare with Civil War photos? And then sort of a related question from Catherine, do sibling photos help in the process? Siblings of people that you know are soldiers.
Right. So as you'd expect, people, they do change facially, they change as they get older, but there is enough of a echo of their appearance in earlier times that it can still help narrow down possibilities. If you think of the artificial intelligence as narrowing down rather than confirming a match, I think it becomes more clear to picture how it's useful. Because yes, you're going to get similar looking people even if they're younger, but you're not going to be able to say, is this person who's 70 years old the same as this person who's 30 years old? That's not going to happen through just the technology. There's human judgment necessary there as well. The question about siblings, I'd make a similar kind of response. Siblings often have lots of facial similarity, so those are going to bring up similar looking people. And on the flip side, every time we do find a match, I often wonder, are you sure that person doesn't have a twin brother? Let's make sure. Check the military records, or see if he had a twin in civilian life before you assume it's the same guy.
Check the census, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remy would like to know if you've identified any women posing as male soldiers. That she noticed there was a woman in one of the opening slides, and what criteria would you use for nurses? I think she's talking about, like, where you mark whether it's a dark frock coat or a light color, where you choose the criteria. What would you enter there?
Yes. So we've made a special effort in the last couple of years to enhance our database for certain categories of images. And one of them is photos of civilian women, as well as nurses and caregivers from the Civil War era. So we've increased it. It's definitely not anywhere near what it should be. We have a few hundred now. The site allows you, when you tag the photo, to first specify, are they wearing a military uniform or are they wearing civilian clothing? So if you pick civilian clothing, it then categorizes that person as a civilian, and then you can search for that separately. We don't have much more detailed tags than that at this point for civilian clothing. Like, we can't say, waistcoat or cravat or anything like that yet, but I think that sort of thing is in the pipeline.
Okay. Rhea would like to know, can you look for photos in the system if you just know the soldier's name, like just to see if there's a picture identified as that person?
Yeah, for sure. So we have a pretty powerful search feature. If you just click search photos at the top, you can search by last name, first name, or both. You can search by a particular state or a particular regiment if you have the state and the number. You can even search by military rank if you just want to see, show me, and branch if you just want to see all the cavalry sergeant majors in our database. You can do that. I don't know why you would, but you can.
You might want to see all the surgeons.
For sure. Yeah.
That'd be pretty interesting. Okay, Richard, this is a different Richard. He would like to know, how does your AI program compare with the biometrics that they use at the airport, those kinds of things, and by counterterrorism investigators? And what can your program do in recognizing soldier photos to the soldier as he or she has aged over time? I think you kind of answered that one, but tell us about the biometrics question.
Yes. So it turns out it's very similar, and that's because we license our face recognition technology from Microsoft. So instead of having to reinvent that wheel, we just take advantage of the folks at Microsoft that spend all day trying to improve face recognition, and we bring it in to this platform. So their face recognition service is one of the best. That's why we use it. And it's used for all kinds of different applications. I believe it's used for national security and law enforcement, but I'm not sure about that. Some of the bigger tech companies have moved away from law enforcement applications. I can't remember which ones have and haven't, but they're also used for marketing and other more surprising types of uses, like recognizing if somebody has gone into a store before, so they are a returning customer, those kinds of things. But it's the same. We're just using it in a very different way than they probably intended.
Right. This is a great question. So can you tell us about how Lieutenant Wakely, Ron Coddington's image, how that ID was made from that, I guess from Ron's image, is that right?
Yeah, so that's a fun story. So the placard that I originally showed from the Dead Letter Office, I believe that one is that whole placard with all the 36 photos. I believe that's in the collection of the Eastman Museum. The George Eastman, the photographer. But the Wakely photo, the identified version, is from Ron Coddington's collection. And I understand that he spoke to your community in the past, but Ron, among many different things that he does, has a series of his photographs that he shares on Flickr. I think it's called Faces of the Civil War or something like that. And so he just adds some of the best images from his collection to the web for other people to enjoy. One of them was this Charles Wakely image. And in the process of researching the Dead Letter Office photo story, I came across that placard, and I had seen the photo from Ron's collection earlier, and I was able to recognize it as a match. So that was good old fashioned, just human ability to see a photo and recognize it when you see it again later. No special technology required. And that's one of the most fun things about Civil War photo sleuthing, I think, is anytime you're looking at photographs, you're building up the database in your brain, and you may potentially see a match that you weren't even expecting to see, or you're just storing it in your head, and eventually later on, sometime in the future, you're going to see that match.
It's a interesting hobby and a lot of fun. There's a lot of people on the platform Civil War Talk that participate in that on a daily basis. Let's see. So Gary asked, have you seen those programs that animate old photographs, make them smile and blink and nod and all that stuff? And tell us what you think of it.
Yes, it seems like they were everywhere a few weeks ago. And I think it's pretty interesting. It's doing a couple of things, that technology. So first, it's doing colorization, of course. It's taking the black and white photo and automatically guessing what the colors would be based on similar kinds of photos in the database. So it doesn't actually know the color of the person's eyes or skin or hair, but it's making an educated guess based on similar photos that it already knows about. And then there's the enhancement and sharpening of the image. Typically, the images that are uploaded, they're damaged or they're low resolution. The AI is enhancing them automatically, but again, it's making guesses. It doesn't really have the details that are missing when you really zoom into that face, but it's sort of painting them in. It's making a guess of what it would look like. And then you combine those with the actual animation. And I've heard mixed reactions. There's a term in computer animation called the Uncanny Valley. And it's the idea that there's a valley where on one end, you've got a cartoon character that looks nothing like a real person, but it's not supposed to. And at the other end, you have an exact photographic likeness. And then in the middle, you've got this uncanny valley. And that's where it doesn't look quite right like a human. It doesn't really look like a cartoon. It just looks creepy. And that's what, animators like Pixar are always trying to avoid. They want to make sure that it's one or the other. And so I think there's a little bit of uncanny valley going on with these animations where at first it's cool, but then it starts to look a little weird, and maybe I end up preferring the one that doesn't move after all.
Some of those images that were hand painted over, you know what I'm talking about, like period images, but an artist would go in and rather than just hand color a little bit, they would paint the whole thing. It kind of is like that because unless the artist was just super talented, you wound up with sort of that same valley that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Let's see. So do you think it'll be possible in the future to age the photograph, like age the person, the subject of a Civil War era photograph, and perhaps be able to match it with an aged picture later, like to identify the soldier as they would have looked at a more advanced age?
Wow. That's a cool question. Yeah, I think it'll probably be possible. I know that there's certainly like police artists that do that sort of thing manually all the time. But I don't know to what extent it can be automated yet. I'm guessing if it is possible, the results probably aren't very good yet. But the interesting thing about AI is that at least the way the technology is advanced in the last few years is it benefits from having more and more examples. So the more examples you have, the better it works. And something like age progression is we really can generate lots of examples. It's not hard to find photos of a person at different ages. So this seems like the kind of thing that the AI would be able to get better at over time. We call that training data.
It's a great concept, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Catherine says if she uploads an image, one of her 105th Ohio, I think she said, one of her images of the 105th Ohio, and another match is found, will she be notified when when somebody else uploads something that matches?
Yes, we recently introduced this feature. Well, sort of recently, a few months ago. When you register on your homepage, we call it a dashboard. There's an area called notifications. And when you hit notifications, it tells you updates about the photographs that you have added or contributed to in some way. So for example, if you add a photograph and it's not identified, and then another user comes along later and gives it a match, gives it a name, you will see that notification. Or if the opposite happens, if you have made an identification and somebody comes along and disagrees with you and they offer a different identification or they vote down on your identification, you'll get that information also. You can also indicate your interests when you create your account. There's a profile where you can say, here are the names I'm interested in, here are the military units that I'm interested in, states, etc. And then you can easily search those and you can easily see what other people are interested in. So we're trying to take some steps towards creating the kind of community that you have with Civil War Talk, where you really know what other people are interested in, what their areas of expertise are, but we still have a ways to go.
And some of the huge collectors have uploaded their pictures from their collections there. So it's really the only place that you get to see those, right?
That's right. We have a few people that we call power users who have each added hundreds of photos just by themselves. Some of them have, at least a few have added thousands of photos by themselves. And we're really lucky that we found them, because our website would have thousands of fewer images without just this handful of people.
Right,
but
right.
you know, that's not typical. The average person is just going to add a few images, and those are just as valuable.
Absolutely. This is our last question, and it's from Richard again. He's asking, we're talking about age progression images. So he's asking, how do they do that for like missing children? Are they using police artists, or are they doing it by AI? And if by AI, it seems like maybe you could use some of that same technology.
Yeah, I don't know so much about that as I'd like to, but my understanding is that it's for the most part a manual process. So there are police artists or other experts who are skilled at doing these kinds of transformations, and it's a time-consuming and costly process because each one has to be done manually. I think again that there are some early stage technologies that try to do it automatically, but my guess is that they don't work particularly well.
Some things humans are still better at, right?
There's still a few left.
One of them was the profile view. And are there any other images that you've seen that humans are just better at than?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'd like to emphasize that in general, humans are better at identifying matches in Civil War photos. The best way to think about AI is it's narrowing down possibilities to a short list. But at the end of the day, you want a human to analyze the actual comparisons of two photos and make a determination. And our website never automatically identifies anything, and that's by design. It will show you suggestions. It will show you high probability matches, but it never links them unless a human being says, yes, I think that's a match. And that's, again, on purpose. We want there to be a human accountable to those decisions so that we can go and blame them later if they turn out to be wrong.
That's not really true. Just so you can, I mean, humans really are better at some things. And I think that especially the difference in ages, when you're comparing two photographs that are of different ages, I think it's much we know, especially when older people, we know how people's faces change as they age. And I think that's one of the things that's probably going to prove to be humans are going to be better at it than artificial intelligence of any kind. Well, Dr. Luther, we thank you so much for joining us tonight and answering all the questions. And as our participants here know, we always try to promote your blogs and websites and books. And so please, everybody, take a few minutes when you log out of the program tonight and head over to CivilWarPhotosleuth.com. The address is there at the top of the page. Sign up for a free account, browse the images, and upload a few images of your own, or 105. Is that how many Carolyn said she had? Or was it the 105th Ohio? I can't remember. 105 images, upload all of them tonight. And it doesn't matter. Remember, it doesn't matter if it's an unknown image or an identified image. As Dr. Luther mentioned, the more photos people upload, the more they're increasing. Every photo up increases the chances that other photos that aren't already identified can be. So set up an account today, CivilWarPhotosleuth.com, and help out the community by uploading photographs that you might have in your possession. Again, many thanks to Dr. Luther for an informative and enjoyable presentation tonight. We have some programs coming up and some that we had last week. If you would like to catch up on past programs here at Civil War Talk Presents, Richard R. Schaus was our guest last week, and his book, Lee is Trapped and Must Be Taken, 11 Fateful Days at Gettysburg After July 4th. Let me say that one more time. Lee is Trapped and Must Be Taken, 11 Fateful Days After Gettysburg, July 4th through 14th, 1863. And the book is still available with the same discount we offered last week. If you'd like to prepare for an upcoming program, you can also pick up Mark Bielski's A Mortal Blow to the Confederacy, The Fall of New Orleans in 1862, and take advantage of the 20% discount. And don't forget to use the new link that Tina typed in the chat there at savasbeatty.com/ref equals CivilWarTalk.com or equals CivilWarTalk. And the code is in the chat that you can use to receive that 20% discount. Again, coming up next Wednesday, our guest will be Mark F. Bielski on his brand new book, A Mortal Blow to the Confederacy, The Fall of New Orleans in 1862, which is set for release in May. So this book is not even out yet. The book will be released from Savas Beatty in May, and we're looking forward to having Mr. Bielski with us to talk about his brand new book on Wednesday, April 28th. So plan to join us then. Our updated schedule is updated. And we have Bielski next week. Norman Dasinger Jr. will be with us to talk about Straits Raid and Forest Bluff on May 5th, almost the anniversary of that event, which Straits surrendered to Forest on May 3rd, 1863 at Cedar Bluff. So there's a lot of B's and all those words in there. At Cedar Bluff, Alabama. On May 3rd, so that'll be almost on the anniversary of that event. On May 12th, we have Theodore Savas with us to talk about the Augusta Powder Works. May 26th, Harold Knudsen here to talk about James Longstreet. This is his brand new book, and we'll be looking forward to hearing about his new book on June 2nd. I'm really excited, and Gary will be excited to know that Gene Saliker will be here to talk about the Sultana explosion. June 9th, Charles Knight from Arlington to Appomattox. Robert E. Lee's Civil War Day by Day. On June 16th, Adolfo Ovis to talk about Custer Marriott and the cavalry of the Army of the Potomac. And on June 23rd, Burt Dunkerley will be back with us to talk about his book, To the Bitter End, Appomattox, the Bennett Place, and the surrender. Y'all's pictures are in the way. Surrenders of the Confederacy. That's it. So we're looking forward to having Burt back. He was so much fun a couple of weeks ago. He's going to come back and be with us again on June 23rd. So hope you guys can join us. If you notice, there's not a program on May 19th, and that is by design because I will have a board meeting that day and won't be able to host. So our program that was tentative didn't come through anyway. So we will miss May 19th. But June, we're scheduled all through June, so we're scheduling now for June 30th and on, and we'll hope to have some Gettysburg programs for you there around the anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. Our next program will be April 28th with Mark Bielski. I hope you'll join us then, 8:30 Eastern. And thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you so much, Dr. Luther, for being with us. We enjoyed it very much. And I will head over to the site now.
Thank you all very much.